Democrats claim to want to unify the country, but impeaching a former president, a private citizen, is the antithesis of unity.
We're going to argue like hell. I'm confident of that, believe me, I know that. I've been there. But I think we can do it in a way that we can get things done for the American people.
President Biden renews his calls for unity amid a raging pandemic and growing political discord. With an impeachment trial less than 2 weeks away, the Republican rift widens. Hello and welcome to Inside America. I'm Ghida Fakhry. It is the first full week of Joe Biden's presidency, and already his call for bipartisan unity to tackle the country's crises is facing significant political obstacles. With a devastating death toll from the coronavirus pandemic expected to reach 500,000 by next month, and the economic and social fallout, Biden signed 10 executive orders aimed at getting the pandemic under control. But major policy changes will require legislative action. The president is calling on Congress to pass a nearly $2 trillion relief package, which includes hundreds of billions of dollars to improve vaccination rollout and increase testing. The plan also includes $1,400 in direct payments to Americans and a $15 minimum wage.
We cannot, will not let people go hungry. We cannot let people be evicted because of nothing they did themselves. They cannot watch people lose their jobs, and we have to act. We have to act now.
But top Republicans have dismissed the plan, which comes on the heels of a $900 billion relief package that was passed late last year. Some Democratic and Republican lawmakers agreed that Biden's plan is too costly. Democrats who now control the Senate are promising to act whether Republicans like it or not.
We hope our Republican friends will see the need and work with us, but if not, we will get it done.
Meanwhile, the House has delivered an article of impeachment to the Senate, charging Donald Trump with, quote, incitement of insurrection. This has triggered a trial in the Senate, which Democrats have agreed to delay until the week of February 8th. That gives Trump and the impeachment managers time to prepare. It also gives Congress a couple of weeks to forge ahead with COVID relief and confirm more members of Biden's cabinet before all focus in the Senate turns to the impeachment hearings. So will Congress act fast on Biden's agenda, or will it be constrained by political gridlock and infighting? Joining me now is Democratic Congressman from California, Jared Huffman. Congressman Huffman, you were in the U.S. Capitol building when it was stormed on the 6th of January. What was it like for you to be caught in the middle of this insurrection? I understand you were in your office, and what do you think needs to happen next?
So in that moment, I did not feel terribly at risk. I have seen Capitol security over the years. I have regarded it as a sort of an impenetrable fortress. And so as we began to get word that there'd been some incursions through barriers, things like that, I just assumed it would quickly be brought under control. The more I learned in the days after that, the more I understand that was a very false sense of security, because for a period of hours there, we really had lost control of the Capitol. It was very dangerous, and there was no one coming to help. So I am, probably more stressed about that experience looking at it in hindsight than I was in that moment.
And you say President Trump needs to be held accountable. I know you've accused him of committing what you say are serious crimes, including sedition and incitement of election fraud. You've been saying there's no middle ground, but given all the pressing issues facing the new president, Joe Biden, and the fact that a conviction in the Senate is far from guaranteed, is a trial in the Senate the right approach, or could Democrats actually be overplaying their hand?
We would all love to not be dealing with this, but I think you have to look at the cost of not having any accountability for a sitting president of the United States who summons this mob, organizes the plan for them to storm the Capitol, funds it, works through his minions and allies to really carry it forward, and then allows it to continue to rage for a number of hours before making any effort to try to help the situation. There just has to be accountability for that. And if you let it pass and look the other way, That's an even greater cost than the awkwardness of pursuing this while we try to do other priorities early in this new Congress.
But isn't it a double-edged sword, though? Won't it make it more difficult for Democrats and the new president to move past Donald Trump, to unify the country and get things done, if he is allowed to return to center stage?
I don't think so. I think accountability is a conditioned precedent. It's a necessary thing that has to happen for all of us to move forward. We've just got to be honest about what happened here. And to look the other way, might seem like a veneer of unity to some, but it would do enormous damage to the rule of law and to whoever comes next and may try to do this again.
And given what you are trying to achieve on the impeachment front, how easy will it be to pass Biden's agenda, the $1.9 trillion coronavirus package, and so much more if the Senate is bogged down with impeachment hearings for days, possibly even weeks?
I don't accept that an impeachment trial would bog the Senate down. The Senate is a big institution with lots of staff and lots of bandwidth. It can walk and chew gum and do an impeachment trial all at the same time.
And this is interesting. It's one of the things that Senator Bernie Sanders has been saying as well, that you could do both at the same time. As you know, he chairs the powerful Senate Budget Committee. He's been signaling, and so have others, they've been saying that they will go ahead with legislation even if Republicans aren't on board. In fact, this is what Senator Sanders said. He said, if Republicans want to come on board and pass COVID relief now, let's do it. But what we aren't going to do is wait weeks and weeks to get the American people, who are living in more economic desperation than at any time since the Great Depression, the help they need. Democrats, though, have a very slim majority in the House. They are virtually tied in the Senate, although they do control it. Can they be flexing their muscles, and will they get things done?
Well, I think we have to. I was just on a call with Bernie Sanders talking about this very subject. And while I don't have a say in the Senate rules and things like, whether they will modernize this anachronism of the filibuster, which is really a holdover from the days of, Jim Crow and segregation. But the answer is they've got to find ways to move things forward. We have a narrow window of time to deliver for the American people. We've learned from prior crises that if you fritter that away, if you spend all your time chasing Republican votes, as we did for health care with the Affordable Care Act, only to see them all vote no anyway after we'd made a whole bunch of changes to address their concerns. We don't have time for that game right now in response to this crisis. We've just got to move. And I hope that many Republicans will join us. We will try to make this bipartisan. But this idea of chasing coy Republicans that have no intention of being part of the solution, I think we're going to be a little smarter this time around.
But it isn't just Republicans that you have to convince. In fact, some Democrats also agree with Republicans who believe the country cannot afford to take on more debt by passing legislation to the tune of $1.9 trillion. The national debt already stands at over $27 trillion. The newly confirmed Treasury Secretary told Congress, as you know, during her confirmation hearings last week, that she and President Biden did not propose the relief package without, as she said, an appreciation for the country's debt burden.
The smartest thing we can do is act big. In the long run, I believe the benefits will far outweigh the costs, especially if we care about helping people who've been struggling for a very long time.
But can the United States continue to spend and borrow so much? The deficit has gone from $1 trillion before the pandemic to $2.3 trillion, and the national debt has increased by almost 40% over the last 4 years alone. How sustainable is this for the U.S.?
Well, there is a time to be concerned about debt and deficits and to be very disciplined about bringing them both down. When you're in a full employment economy and things are going very well, that's really the time to do it. And that's why it was so shameful that President Trump and congressional Republicans passed a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans that exploded the debt and the deficit. But now we're in the middle of a crisis, an economic crisis and a pandemic. This is not the time to allow your solutions to be hampered by concerns about debt and deficits, especially when you have essentially zero interest rate. So as we think about something big like an infrastructure package that can be responsive, this Build Back Better vision, we can borrow our own money at 0% interest, and it really makes sense to do that now. It will better serve our goal of bringing some fiscal controls in place long term if we do this, rather than if we somehow revert into what I would regard as disingenuous fiscal conservatism.
All right, Congressman Jared Huffman, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Now, no president impeached by the House has ever been convicted by the Senate. But could Donald Trump be the first? And can a president be convicted after he leaves office? I'm now joined by someone who has experience in these deliberations. Former Senator Byron Dorgan from North Dakota served for 30 years in the US Congress. He voted not guilty on both charges during the Senate impeachment trial against Democratic President Bill Clinton in 1999. Senator Dorgan, the article of impeachment that senators will vote on this time, it is much simpler, more straightforward than the one you voted on more than 20 years ago. But in the end, President Clinton was acquitted on charges of perjury, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. All the votes, I believe, to convict came from the GOP, the other party. This is what you said at the time.
This is truly a drama with no heroes. I mean, this drama goes on, and there clearly are no heroes in this drama that we've been going through. My role is not in this trial and in this circumstance to defend the president. My role is to defend the Constitution.
Today, Senator, there are members of the Senate from the president's own party making the argument that this is all counterproductive, that the country has enough problems to deal with right now, that this is the time for unity, not retribution. Some Republicans are saying it's simply absurd to convict a former president, saying the impeachment trial should be dismissed before it even begins. What do you say to them?
Look, I think there has to be accountability. I understand the point they're making. I don't agree with it at all. We all are witnesses to what the president did. For 6 months, he urged people he said to them, if I lose, it's because the election was stolen. Then he urged people to come to Washington for a wild time. And then he made a speech and he said, let's go to the Capitol. The fact is, we all saw it. And I think there has to be accountability. When a mob rushes to the Capitol, people are dead. There just has to be accountability. And that's why there is this impeachment.
You say there must be accountability, but some, like Senator Rand Paul, say this, quote, the Constitution says two things about impeachment. It is a tool to remove the office holder, and it must be presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Neither one of those things will happen. This charade will be nothing more than bitter partisanship and political theater. When you consider that the Chief Justice, John Roberts, isn't the one who's going to be presiding over this trial, it is going to be the longest serving Democrat in the Senate, Patrick Leahy. He will be both juror and judge. Doesn't it feed into this potential perception that this is a partisan expedition?
I believe in this circumstance, when the president is no longer in office, it is the president pro tem of the Senate that is designated to run the trial. And by the way, with respect to Rand Paul, I mean, he's wrong about almost everything. Once again, he suggests that, there has to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That is not the case. The case is that the president pro tem of the Senate is actually presiding in an impeachment trial of this sort. And I think there needs to be accountability. And that accountability will be part of the impeachment trial. They'll make a judgment, and then they'll move on. And we'll see. I have no idea whether he'd be convicted, but I think there needed to be an impeachment trial.
But what if there is acquittal? You've said that if you were still a senator today, you would vote to convict. But how do you still respond to people on the other side of the aisle who say that this isn't just counterproductive, that the last time it was attempted with Donald Trump almost a year ago, he was acquitted after a trial that lasted 21 days?
Yeah, I would have voted to convict him then as well. I mean, you don't know what he did. He went to the head of the Ukrainian government and said, you're not going to get the help, the funding that the United States has promised unless you investigate Joe Biden and his son. I mean, that was impeachable. But in this case, look, he incited a crowd to attack the Capitol. Let's hear all the evidence, but we've seen all the evidence. We know the evidence. The American people know it. And then let's make a judgment. But he's gone. He's down in Mar-a-Lago, apparently in Florida. And, you have this trial. I hope it's short. I hope they make a judgment that this country cannot countenance that sort of behavior by a president or by anyone. If you incite a violent mob to come to Washington to storm the Capitol and people are dead, it seems to me you ought to be accountable for that.
But can you count on the 17 Republican senators needed to vote guilty, to actually vote guilty, even those top Republicans like Mitch McConnell, who've recently criticized Trump for provoking the mob? Can you count on them to translate their criticism into a vote, to vote to convict?
I think it's unlikely. You couldn't count on them for much of anything for 4 years. They excused embarrassing behavior, they excused dangerous behavior, and they excused, in my judgment, some criminal behavior on the part of this president. And they did it for 4 years. So I don't think you can count on anything, but have the impeachment trial, have them cast their votes, and then move on.
As you know, there are also those who question whether or not it is constitutional to convict a former president. Article 2 of the Constitution, in fact, says the president, the vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Is it constitutional to impeach and convict a president who is no longer in office?
There's a wide amount of research by constitutional scholars who say it is constitutional to do so, and I agree with them.
All right, Senator Dorgan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
Meanwhile, the rift among Republicans continues to grow, with Donald Trump now out of the White House and Republican senators debating whether or not to vote to convict the former president and bar him from holding future public office. Republicans are divided on how much to rally behind the former leader of their party. In his farewell speech before leaving Washington, D.C., President Trump refused to count himself out.
So just a goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form.
And now from his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, Trump is reportedly entertaining the idea of launching a third party to rival the traditional GOP. Ronna McDaniel, the head of the Republican Party and a longtime Trump supporter, spoke out against a third-party split. But with traditional conservatives and Trump loyalists at odds over the Senate impeachment trial, can the party stay together? Joining me now is Vernon Jones, former Georgia state congressman, a lifelong Democrat. He recently switched to the Republican Party. Representative Jones, when we spoke before the election, you were a Democrat who supported Donald Trump. Now you're a Republican. You made the announcement, in fact, to switch parties just 2 days after the Capitol insurrection, saying that you were proud to join the party of Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and Donald Trump. Lincoln and Roosevelt were never accused of inciting an insurrection. Trump is. What message were you sending?
Well, actually, I disagree with those who put that narrative out there that the president started an insurrection. Actually, I think Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and many of those in Congress who are Democrats allowed Antifa and Black Lives Matter not only to have over 26 people killed during their riotings and their violent protests, but also federal courthouses, police stations burned, courthouses burned, many people's personal and private property and government property was destroyed. And they sat idly by on the sideline and never came out and condemned it and called them out by name.
But that's all very well, Representative. But, you know, we're talking about the insurrection, the storming of the Capitol building. Clearly, that wasn't done by Antifa. These were mobs of Trump supporters who many accused the president of inciting. He gave speeches in the moments before they stormed the building, telling them to fight like hell.
Well, let me say this. No one should violate the law. No one should break the law. They should, of course, be given swift justice. But let's put this in perspective. You had thousands and thousands of people out there. You had maybe 100 plus that actually were violent. Some went into the building. They were not breaking windows out. They were not hitting anyone. So there's a combination. But we also finding out there are other people that were embedded in there, and some have had ties to Antifa and Black Lives Matter. So to just totally discount that is just not fair.
Representative, isn't the real problem the repeated attempts to overturn the election results, to say that it was stolen, as you and so many other Republicans have done? The big lie, as it's being called. In one of your tweets, in fact, you wrote, "We will fight to the end for Donald Trump, #StopTheSteal." You even spoke of a political gunfight. I mean, isn't that kind of incendiary language? And these false claims of election fraud, what have gotten the country to the brink?
Actually, it's kind of interesting you said that. Now we can't say, oh, we're going to fight until the end. Fight is used on many occasions. I've heard reporters use the word fight to the end on many occasions. So those who want to take it out of proportion, that's fine. I think you all know what I mean. Our framers talked about fighting until the end. And what I reference is an old term that, you don't fire until you see the white of their eyes, meaning we're going into battle. We're going to fight for what we believe and what we stand up for. So let's put it in perspective, not take it out of place. But
these are different times, aren't they, though? These are different times.
Sure. But what allowed these different times, when you had Black Lives Matter and Antifa destroying this country throughout the entire summer, don't you think that was much more of an insurrection? Don't you think that was much more violent? And it went along. As a matter of fact, some used Dr. King's terms like the phrase, riots are the results of people not being heard. So they justified those insurrections, but because it's Donald Trump. And by the way, I was there that day.
It's not because it's Donald Trump, but isn't it because this was an attempt to take over the Capitol building at a time when there was an important procedure that was going on to certify the election results? You accuse the Democratic Party of being part of this wider fraud, but it was the leader of the Republican Party, wasn't it, who was threatening the Georgia Secretary of State in your own home state to find 11,000 votes or else. It was Trump who was also reportedly trying to fire the acting Attorney General and replace him with someone who would actually overturn the election. Is there any doubt?
Okay,
which side?
You can talk to Donald Trump about that, because a lot of that is misinformation, misguided, misdirection, and erroneous and reckless. And I'm surprised you would bring those up. However, I will say
how is it erroneous
in the state of
Georgia?
In the state of Georgia, well, it's reckless to say that Donald Trump, he said, I was there peacefully. Let your Congress know. That's the people's house. People are supposed to be able to go to the U.S. Capitol. That's their house. It's not government. It's not Congress's house. It's the people's house. So what you're saying, like
to
others,
go in violently,
people now have
Representative
no right.
Jones, to go in violently and stop the business of certifying the election?
And thousands did not go in there in violence. And you're putting them all in the same barrel. Because I was there. I did not storm the U.S. Capitol. Many other people were there. They did not storm the U.S. Capitol. Those that did, they were wrong, and they should be prosecuted, not taken that away.
And should the former president be convicted in the Senate, do you think, for his role in inciting?
What was his role?
Supporters?
He didn't incite. No, he didn't incite anybody. Those that were there who broke the windows incited people to go in it. Not this president. He never has. As a matter of fact, every Trump rally I've ever attended was very peaceful. But this is fact, though.
Not all of the Trump supporters were violent, you're quite right, but quite a number of them were. But let me ask you this. You joined the party.
Of Democrat supporters were
Vernon,
violent.
You joined the party at a time when it is facing what some are calling an existential threat. Some Republican senior officials, in fact, say that they want to purge the party of radical extremists. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the GOP needs to do something about these radical elements, the QAnon conspiracy theories, if it is to survive and to appeal to the majority that happens to lie in the ideological political center of the party?
Well, first of all, there are extremes on both sides, and I condemn both extremes on both sides. Let's be clear about that. Democrat supporters, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they are Democrat supporters. But I don't hear anybody asking Joe Biden or Kamala Harris to put them out of the party. And you can't deny they don't support Democrats. As a matter of fact, the day that Biden was sworn in, Antifa held a big protest and a burning downtown Portland. But nobody said anything about it. Joe Biden never called them out and said they were terrorists. So it's the hypocrisy of this. And so to try to shape the narrative that this is all about Republicans, this is all about Donald Trump, it's been intellectually dishonest.
All right, former Representative Vernon Jones, thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you.
Now that Trump has vacated the White House with a second impeachment in tow, whether he will be convicted by the Senate of high crimes and misdemeanor remains an open question, one that has less to do with culpability and more with calculus, 2 years ahead of midterm elections. Republican senators are in a serious predicament. They know that Trump may have incited the January 6th insurrection, but they also know that convicting Trump may cost them their senatorial seats. Trump threatening his fellow Republicans with a breakaway party makes that calculus even more difficult. If the Senate does convict Trump and he makes good on his threat, the Democratic Party will celebrate a dream come true. the loss of a solid 30 to 40 million Trump base, without which the Republican Party doesn't stand a chance in electoral contests. If Trump is acquitted, some segments of the traditional Republican Party may feel alienated after the storming of the US Capitol, the symbol of democracy Americans of all persuasions believed was unshakable. Already, Trump's popularity has taken a dent. So in short, the political fate of Trump and the credibility of American democracy hinges for now on the votes of 17 Republican senators who can make history by convicting the very first US president. And with Trump's tanking fortunes and looming legal battles in the balance, a number of Republican senators is simply likely to put their finger in the wind the day the Senate votes on Trump's second impeachment trial and decide to stand up or stand down. Send me your thoughts and comments from me and the entire team in Washington. Thanks for watching.